This is apropos. It is the latest atrocity in a war that's raged for over 31 months. Paramilitary fighters have been rampaging through what had been the Sudanese military's last major stronghold in Darfur, killing and detaining hundreds of people since the RSF took full control of El-Fasher on Sunday. The UN said the risk of further large-scale ethnically motivated atrocities was rising as it called for the safe passage of trapped civilians out of the city. The war began in April 2023 when simmering tensions between the Sudanese military and the RSF exploded into open fighting, as Karis Garland reports.
Two warring sides, each supported by multiple armed groups. The Sudanese Armed Forces and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces used to work alongside each other, but have been locked in a bloody civil war since April 2023. The army, in its current form, was established in 1956 when Sudan gained independence from the Anglo-Egyptian condominium. It's estimated to have some 200,000 active personnel. After Omar al-Bashir led a coup in 1989, the military became deeply intertwined with Sudan's economic activities, with the army and other linked entities controlling natural resources like oil fields, gold mines, and agricultural land. Fighting the army is the Rapid Support Forces. The RSF grew out of the Janjaweed, an Arab-majority armed group from eastern Chad and the Sudanese region of Darfur. The Janjaweed were used by Bashir's government in 2003 to help the army put down a rebellion in Darfur. The conflict killed an estimated 300,000 people and displaced more than 2 million. With Bashir's support, the militia was formally organised under the RSF banner in 2013, its members going on to be used as border guards in particular. In 2017, a law legitimising it as an independent security force was passed. The RSF is thought to have some 100,000 troops and is led by Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, also known as Hemeti. Despite previously being hired by Bashir to protect him from coup and assassination attempts, the RSF ultimately joined forces with the Sudanese army in 2019 to overthrow Bashir after months of demonstrations against his near three-decade rule. Months later, the military and pro-democracy movement established a transitional sovereign council. Hemeti was announced as its deputy head, while an army general called Abdel Fattah al-Burhan was appointed to lead it. The two men disagreed on the direction the country was going in and on whether to incorporate the RSF into the army. It's thought both generals wanted to maintain their positions of power. Following days of tension, shooting broke out between the two sides in April 2023, though it's disputed who fired the first shot.
For more, we're joined now by Jan Pospisil, an associate professor at Coventry University Centre for Peace and Security. Jan, thanks so much for being with us on the programme. Human rights groups are saying that up to 2,000 unarmed civilians have been killed since Sunday. Are we going to look back, do you think, at this moment, the capture of the city, as a turning point in the war in Sudan?
It's certainly a low point. If it's a turning point, will have to be seen. What came to be seen over the last couple of hours is surely something nobody wants to see, and it's just well, it's incredible what atrocities had happened. I've seen video footage of people just being randomly shot. I've spoken today with people who are with contact with people in the region, especially around Tawila, which is the next city from El-Fasher, and where refugees want to flee to. And apparently RSF troops are basically hunting refugees even down this road and indiscriminately killing people around there.
And Jan, what is at the heart of this conflict, and why has it not received the same kind of global attention as other wars have? We think obviously of Gaza and Ukraine.
Well, these two questions are actually probably interlinked. Sudan is not that easy. We have, like in Gaza, Israel and Palestine, two clear sides. We have in Ukraine also two countries basically at war with one another. But to explain what actually happens to Sudan is much more complex, and probably it's this complexity that makes it also more difficult to take sides. There is hardly any sympathy for any of these two sides, neither among most Sudanese nor internationally. So this makes any kind of solidarity in a way more difficult than in wars where you can more easily take sides. What is at the heart of the conflict is a failed transition process after the revolution against the Bashir government, and the failure to basically bind the military back, bring it back to the barracks, and to demilitarize a state that was under these decades of Bashir rule, basically a function of the military, with the military complex basically dominating even the economy of the country.
And Jan, you've said in the past that this conflict exposes the limits of international mediation efforts when they're not also accompanied by political substance. So why the lack of meaningful political engagement then?
Well, what we have to see in Sudan, it's actually a regional war. We have several of the regional powers actively involved here. First and foremost, of course, the United Arab Emirates that are heavily supporting, still on a daily basis, the rapid support forces. We have a substantial involvement of Egypt, more on the side of the Sudanese armed forces. We have Iran there, Russia, Turkey, to an extent Saudi Arabia. And we have the other side, we have neighboring countries, with Chad, we have political involvement of other countries in the region. So it's a very complex regional situation here. And at the heart of the problem of the international mediation efforts is, in essence, stopping the regional support for the two fighting forces, especially the heavy support of the United Arab Emirates for the rapid support forces. As long as this support isn't cut, there is no interest at the moment to stop the fighting on both sides, basically.
So what actually needs to be done then? And can these warring sides be brought together? Is there any hope at all of that, or is a permanently divided Sudan inevitable at this point?
Well, at the moment, especially now after the success of the RSF by taking El-Fasher, which also frees up quite a lot of their troops. I hear up to 20,000 of their troops are freed up now by this victory and are able to move to other parts of the country to extend the war there. The interest of the RSF for a ceasefire has certainly declined. The international efforts are in a way not taking off really, but there is things happening. The Americans, the US, have established a so-called Quad group, which brings the big regional players together. The Quad is, besides the US, the Emirates, the Egyptians, and the Saudi Arabia. And the Quad has released a statement. It is also like a lot of internal mediation that goes around. There's at the moment delegations from both sides actually in Washington, D.C., speaking with the American Special Envoy Boulos on potential developments towards a ceasefire. But the problem is, even if there is a short-lived humanitarian ceasefire, there haven't been any meaningful political negotiations going on for quite a while now.
And the Quad as well, it wants this transitional civilian government, if it is eventually set up. They say that it needs to exclude both the army and the RSF, but is either side going to agree to that? Is that feasible, do you think?
Well, the problem is that this was basically the trigger point of the military coup in 21, and then later the war that we are seeing now. It was after the revolution of 2019 against Bashir, the clear aim of the civilian part of the transitional government to get the military back to the barracks. And in the end, they simply decided to not accept that, because they are also, first of all, under political pressure, especially by Islamist groups from the north of the country, to defend their interests. And they have their own significant economic, political interests. They have ruled this country for long, and they are not willing just to go back like that. When I speak with people close to SAF, they are very clear. They say, okay, we are willing to stop the war. We're willing to accept the transitional government as long as there's no RSF in there and as long as we are represented there to safeguard our interests, which is in turn a non-starter for others. So this is the heart of the conundrum, and this is the heart of the problem, how to get the military out of power.
Yeah, because you say as well that civil society has been essentially sidelined during all of these mediation efforts. So how can efforts to reach peace be successful if civil society isn't involved in the conversation?
Well, we might see how the situation now plays out after the fall of El-Fasher. What happened over the last year was a polarization in the conflict, that both sides, in a way, like RSF as well as the Sudanese armed forces, gained quite some ground in aligning with other smaller militia movements and political forces. So the alliances of both sides became bigger, and it looked like as a very polarized situation where civil voices basically had no space anymore, even in political negotiations and also on the ground. But now with the atrocities that had been seen, but on the other hand, also quite substantial militia support of SAF basically getting eradicated in this fall of El-Fasher, this might lead to the blocks becoming a bit dismantled and probably a more flexible situation developing.
And can lessons that have been learned during peacekeeping efforts elsewhere be applied to Sudan, or is it just the situation there? Is it just too complex and too different to anything that we're seeing playing out anywhere else, or to wars and conflicts that have previously been resolved?
Well, the issue with peacekeeping at the moment is that it's not a very popular concept. When we see the recent developments over the last year, the US administration has decided to basically divest from peacekeeping. We have seen huge reductions now in South Sudan and in the huge peacekeeping mission there. We have seen a lack of funding in Somalia. So even if there is if there would be countries willing to go for peacekeeping, the question is who would pay for it, and are there funds available? It looks unlikely, but even at the moment, we are far away from this situation. We have at the moment basically two scenarios that are possible. One is more the one going the Libya way, with freezing the current front line, which is now more clear than it had been, and basically two separate administrations establishing themselves. And I would think this is the more likely scenario, to be fair, with current fighting also increasing in Kordofan and other parts of the country, that this leads to renewed escalation and perhaps even a counterattack on Khartoum, which is currently back in the hands of the Sudanese armed forces. So this is not a situation where peacekeeping comes in, especially in the current climate where a Chapter 7 mandated peacekeeping mission with hard means available is very unlikely to be sanctioned by the Security Council.
Jan Pospisil, thanks so much for being with us on the programme this evening. We do appreciate your time.